The midday heat draped over the roof like a damp cloth left to dry above a kitchen stove. I turned on the fan in the kitchen. Its monotonous were sounding like the breath of an older adult who no longer has anything left to say. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, slicing thin golden lines across the table I had wiped clean to a shine earlier that morning. I was making a pot of mint tea when the phone buzzed on the wooden shelf by the sink, the low, drawn-out vibration sounding like something about to fall, but never quite does, a message from Micah. I dried my hands with a kitchen towel, still keeping that habit, even though they weren't dirty. I opened the phone. Sometimes I think we shouldn't expect anything from a message. But how do you stop yourself? You can live alone for years, be a mother countless times, and still, there's always a soft part of you that hopes the child you once held in your arms will send something kind. The message lit up against the white screen. Hey Mom, we're going to Florida with Rachel's family this summer. You probably won't come this time. Don't be sad, okay? Rachel wants it to be just family. Love you. I read it slowly. The first time to understand. The second time to make sure I hadn't misread. And the third to endure it. The words seemed gentle, polite even. But there was nothing gentle about them. The word family in quotation marks, as if to make it clear I no longer belonged in that definition. I stood still. I didn't get angry, cry, or drop the teacup. I just stopped. My body didn't feel like it was here anymore. Like I had become part of the thin light streaming through the glass door, reflecting off the porcelain dishes I had just washed, water still clinging to the insides of the bowls, shimmering like glass. I sat down. The phone screen was still lit. I typed a single word. Okay. Then stared at it for a long while. One word. Weightless. But it wasn't acceptance. It was a surrender. It was the quiet closing of a door with your hand, so you won't have to hear anything more. I pressed send. Nothing happened. No reply. No call. No explanation. And I wasn't expecting one. I looked out the window. The row of trees in the distance stood motionless, their leaves unmoving, as if the world was holding its breath, careful not to disturb someone who had just been left behind. I used to think that if I loved enough and gave enough, there would always be a place for me in some house, a chair at the dinner table, and a name called out when counting how many people were going on the next trip. But that's not how it works. Some exclusions don't come with shouting or arguments. They arrive in a message in words soft as cotton but cold as stone. I stood up and poured the tea down the sink. The scent of mint rose momentarily, then disappeared down the drain. I thought of Micah, my son, the boy who once ran toward me in the rain, his shirt pulled over his head, clutching a messy watercolor set. He once wrote in his first-grade notebook, "My mom is the strongest person in the world." And I believed that for decades. I used to live in the attic room of his house, the small upstairs space Rachel once called adequate for an elderly person. Back then I was still a part of it all, even if I was the part tucked away in the attic. Now I'm in a ground-floor apartment in a senior housing complex. A place where they remind you not to keep pets, avoid thick rugs because they're a tripping hazard, and always keep your phone on you in case something happens. I opened the photo frame on the table, the most recent picture of Liam and me, my grandson. He was laughing with his mouth wide open, holding the ice cream I just bought him at the park. The wind had tousled his hair. He hugged me and asked, "Grandma, are you coming to the beach with us?" I had said, "If your mom lets me." Then I smiled. I often smile like that to hide the cracks no one sees. Now it's clear. Rachel doesn't want me there. Micah didn't object. That's enough. I locked the screen and placed the phone in the drawer. Not because I was afraid of losing it, but because I didn't want to wait for another message. I had Micah when I had just turned 28, the age people say a woman is mature enough to be a mother, but all I felt was fear. Fear of the crying at night, fear of having to stretch an already thin paycheck, fear of becoming the kind of mother mine had been, always tired, always resentful, always feeling inadequate. I lived in El Paso, Texas, in a small rental house with my first husband, Keith. He left when Micah was 4, saying something straightforward before closing the door. I wasn't born to be a dad. I didn't try to stop him. Not because I was strong, but because when someone turns away with their whole heart, your voice only echoes into the emptiness. The years that followed were a haze. I worked at a flower shop off Montana Avenue, where I learned to tie ribbons, wrap colored paper, and stick carnations into foam like I was patching the fragments of my life. But the pay wasn't enough for rent, for food, for hospital bills every time Micah had an asthma attack in the middle of the night. I started learning to drive for deliveries, a job the church ladies recommended, usually meant for men. But I had no choice. I remember the first time I drove overnight from El Paso to Albuquerque, eyes burning from caffeine, hands trembling as I signed the receipt, but still smiling because I was thinking of the can of soup I'd buy Micah the next morning. I used to sleep in the truck, head resting on the steering wheel, my dreams interrupted by the blare of car horns and the echo of a child calling for his mother. Micah was often left with our neighbor, Mrs. Carla, a widow who baked and sang country songs. Some mornings I'd come home and find Micah sitting on the steps, eyes red from waking up without me. I'd pull him into my arms, pat his back and whisper, "Just a few more years and I'll be home more." But those few years stretched into 10. I always worked more than I needed to, thinking one more delivery, one more bit saved would make me good enough to be a mother. But the cost was missing so many things: his first school concert, the time he split his forehead during gym class, the parent-teacher meeting where the teacher said, "Micah is very well behaved, but he tends to look out the window a lot." I didn't dare ask what he was looking at. I imagined part of it was missing me, part of it was resenting me, and the rest was something a child wouldn't know how to name. We used to have such simple evenings, the two of us eating canned noodles, watching cartoons on a secondhand VS player, me washing his hair in a plastic tub, drying it with a towel, then making up bedtime stories on the spot. Once he asked, "Were you a princess before you had me?" I laughed and said, "I was a truck driver." He said, "But you're the strongest person in the world." I wrote that sentence inside the cover of a notebook and used it like a prayer whenever I felt too exhausted to go on. One winter I couldn't pay the electricity bill on time. The heater shut off. I lit some candles and wrapped Micah in layers of scarves. When he asked, "Why is it cold in our house, Mom?" I lied, "I like it this way, like a snow story." He laughed, nodded and curled into my chest. That was when I truly felt like a mother, not because I had enough money, but because I had enough warmth. I don't remember exactly when Micah started to grow up. Maybe it was when he fixed the broken washing machine or got a full scholarship to UT Austin. The day he left, I hugged him tightly by the Greyhound bus, the wind blowing so hard I had to cling to his coat like I was afraid he'd vanish into some distant town. He whispered, "I'll make you proud." And he did. Micah graduated with honors, got a job quickly, and was promoted early. He met Rachel at a tech seminar. She had bright eyes, a confident voice, and a smile with just a hint of pride. First, I was thrilled. I thought, my son finally has the kind of home I never could give him. But not long after, I began to feel like a guest in his life. Rachel was always polite but cold. She kept calling me Mrs. Grayson long after the wedding. The first time I visited their new home, Rachel introduced me to her friends as Micah's mom from El Paso. I smiled, but something inside me tightened. I reminded myself, every daughter-in-law is distant at first. I'd been distant from Keith's mother too. But the difference was I never pushed her out of the family picture. Rachel over time did. Dinners grew fewer. Messages saying we're busy this week became more frequent. I still visited, looked after Liam whenever they asked, brought homemade cookies, and lulled him to sleep with old stories about his father. But there was something in Rachel's gaze that made me feel like an extra chair in the living room, carefully dusted, but never sat in. Once while shopping with Micah I asked, "Do you think I'm a burden?" He paused briefly, then shook his head. "No, Mom. It's just we're trying to find balance." I didn't ask for more. Because I knew that once someone starts balancing you against other things, you're no longer at the center. But I stayed quiet. I thought, as long as I don't cause trouble, I'll still belong. I never imagined the day when a single line of text would be enough to push me out completely. I now look down at my hands, sun-darkened, calloused, old scars faintly visible. These hands once gripped a steering wheel through the night for that child. And now those same hands had typed and sent a single word, "Okay." That word began as self-protection, but ended in surrender. Not just surrendering a trip, but surrendered the idea that I ever truly mattered to someone. When Micah and Rachel married, I sold the last delivery truck I still owned. withdrew every cent from my retirement savings earlier than planned, and gathered everything I could still call mine to afford the down payment on a small house in the northern suburbs of Dallas. 3 bedrooms, a red-tiled front porch, a white wooden fence, and a backyard big enough for a child's swing. Whenever I imagined Micah raising his family there, in a home with his name on it, my heart would go quiet, not out of regret but out of relief. I had spent more than half my life in month-to-month rentals, moving from district to district, state to state, through rooms where the curtains were always drawn to block the sun and the noise of other people. I never had the chance to put down roots. But my son did. I didn't put my name on anything when I signed the transfer papers. Rachel's lawyer asked if I wanted joint ownership, or to document my contribution somehow. I declined. I said, "He's my son. This house is the start of his life. I don't want to leave my name behind like some awkward debt of gratitude." Rachel smiled and said I was generous. But I wasn't gracious. I just wanted to believe that the law wouldn't be necessary if I loved enough. When they moved in, I helped Micah paint the fence. That spring was damp, the smell of paint mingled with the wind, and we both ended up splattered and laughing. I brought muffins to their small housewarming party, stood by the food table watching Micah laugh with his friends, then turned to see Rachel hugging her grandmother, a woman in a beige cardigan, pearl necklace, and a slow East Coast voice. When the woman turned to me, Rachel said, "This is Micah's mom. She's helped us a lot." The word slit past my ears like a thin blade. Not mother-in-law, not the one who gave us this house, not part of the family, just someone who had once helped. After Rachel gave birth to Liam, I moved in for a while. The small attic room, once used for storage, was fitted with a single bed and a night lamp. Rachel had called it decent enough for an older person, and I nodded, even though the stairs were steep and the heater didn't work well on days the temperature dropped below 10 degrees. I woke at 6, made coffee, washed towels, changed diapers, and soothed the baby to sleep. Rachel usually slept until noon, and Micah worked downstairs on calls, meetings, and printing documents. I never counted the things I did. Never wrote down the nights I held the baby while he cried without pause. I did it as if it were simply my duty. And honestly, I wanted to. Not for credit. Just because he was my grandson. My son's son. I used to believe that if I stayed present long enough, quietly enough, I would naturally remain part of the family. But then Rachel began to talk about personal space. She said, "Mom, I think you need some rest too. Maybe return to your place for a few days to feel more comfortable." I nodded. A few days turned into weeks. Then came the point where I couldn't ask, "Can I visit?" I had to wait to be invited. Once I came by because the nanny had called off and Liam had a fever. I didn't call ahead, didn't think I needed to. Rachel opened the door, stood in the frame, and said gently, "Next time, please let me know first so I can plan around it." I went home. No arguing, no complaints. I had learned how to withdraw without making a sound. After that, I never went back to their house. I sent holiday gifts, fabric books for kids, wooden toys, and handwritten cards. I still texted whenever I missed my grandson saying, "I'm doing well. Hope you have some free time this weekend." Some messages were read without a reply. Once I brought cookies over. The housekeeper opened the door, told me to leave the box on the shelf, then quietly closed the door again. Not out of malice, I knew it was just convenient. But one thought kept repeating. I once believed that house would be a place I could walk into as if it were mine because I had given it away with the rest of my life. And yet now I stand at the door waiting for someone to open it, hoping I'm not a bother. Not because my name isn't on the deed. But once trust is left outside the threshold, it never finds its way back in. Lately I've been forgetting small things. Not the kind of confusion that makes you lose your way or forget your loved ones' names, but the scattered details of daily life. I once left my keys in the fridge, opened a drawer looking for the remote and pulled out an old button instead, brewed a pot of coffee and forgot to press the switch. One day, I walked home without clearly remembering where I had been. Everything feels covered in a thin mist, not gone, but no longer distinct. Maybe it's not that my memory is failing, but that living alone for so long has made the days blur into each other, all blending into a pale gray, like the hallway walls in the senior complex where I live now. It's not a bad place. Each apartment has a window facing the lawn, and there's a shared bench under the porch where people sit to read the paper or watch traffic pass. They host art classes every Wednesday, yoga on Sunday mornings, and movie screenings on the weekend. I tried joining a few times then stopped. Not because anyone did anything to me, but because when you've spent so many years revolving around someone else, a child, a grandchild, learning to revolve around just yourself feels clumsy. I never know what to say when someone asks, "What's your favorite dish?" Or "Do you have plans for this year?" Each simple question seems to echo into a space. I don't particularly crave anything anymore, and the only plan I ever had was to be near my son, to help raise my grandson, to be there when they needed me. Now that they don't, I live like someone waiting at a bus stop, unsure if anything is coming. I still call Micah. Not often. Once a month maybe, or when there's a clear reason like Liam's birthday or Rachel's. I often send a message. "I miss my grandson," or "I hope you're all well." Some messages are read but left unanswered. Some calls go to voicemail after 2 rings. It used to hurt, then slowly became just emptiness. Prolonged silence doesn't make you shout louder. It makes you withdraw your voice gently, gradually, like someone who once talked a lot but now keeps quiet because no one's listening. One time I heard Liam's voice on the phone. Micah had picked up. It was noisy, I could hear waves or wind, and I heard Liam ask, "Where's Grandma?" Then Rachel's voice cut in. "Grandma's busy, sweetheart." That wasn't meant for me, but I heard it. Grandma's busy. I sat in silence for a long time after the call ended. I had once stayed countless nights watching over Liam, soothing, changing, and rocking him in the dark, while his parents slept soundly downstairs. But now, when he asked where I was, the answer wasn't she couldn't come. It was she's busy. As if I were the one who chose distance. It was as if I were off somewhere, living my bustling life, not sitting alone in a 1-bedroom apartment, watching the afternoon sunlight shift through a white curtain. I keep a small tin box in a drawer, filled with things I can't bring myself to throw away. Crayon scribbles from Micah's preschool days, Liam's newborn sock I once hid because it was too cute to part with, a birthday card Rachel wrote to me that first year, her handwriting still soft and even then, not sharp like now. Whenever I feel myself fading, I open that box. Not to relive the past, but to remind myself that I once existed, fully, clearly, without question, in someone's life. I still walk in the afternoons across the lawn behind the building. Sometimes I see other women visited by their children. Some are in wheelchairs, and some are holding grandchildren in their laps. They talk, share old stories, or sit quietly watching a bird fly by. I'm not jealous. I feel a quiet ache in some unnamed part of myself. One day, as I was sitting on the bench in the backyard, an older woman passed by and asked, "Do your grandkids call often?" I shook my head, then smiled faintly. "He's busy." She smiled too and said nothing else. At our age, we understand each other through very short sentences. No need to explain. No need to pretend. We sat there for a while, then each drifted toward our own porches, like 2 leaves carried by the wind, not colliding or holding on. I still keep a photo of Micah and Liam on the table by my bed. The wooden frame is worn, and the image is slightly faded from years of sunlight. Sometimes I look at it and wonder, if I disappeared now, would anyone notice the absence? Not the big kind of grief, not a funeral, but the real realization that a part of their life was no longer there. I don't know. And maybe I no longer need a clear answer. These days I think a lot about fading. Not about endings, but about the quiet dissolving, like the wisp of smoke after a candle goes out. No one remembers or mentions it, but for a brief moment it once lit up a dark room. There was a long period when I believed that love, if quiet enough, steady enough, would find its way back on its own. I never blamed Micah, at least not in the way people usually blame their children. I always considered him inward, reserved, and afraid of letting others down. When he was young, he wrote me little notes. "I'm sorry for making you sad." Or "I promise I won't lie again." I kept them all in a tin box, alongside some commemorative coins and my old wedding ring. But one day, I read through them and realized I couldn't remember what I had been sad about. All that remained were the shaky letters and a strange sense of distance, like I was reading letters from a child who once lived in my house, not my son. My love for Micah was never fiery or dramatic. It was the kind of love rooted deep in the soil, not blooming bright, but anchoring everything in place. I used to think that if I just held on patiently enough, someday Micah would ask, "Mom, why haven't you come over in a while?" But he didn't ask. and I didn't bring it up. Over time, I understood that some relationships don't fall apart with loud crashes. They recede quietly, like the tide, leaving no trace. No one cries. No one is angry. Just fades. And then it's gone. I still make coffee every morning in the mug that says "World's Best Grandma," a gift Rachel gave me the first Thanksgiving after Liam was born. The words are faded now, and just a few faint silver curves are left. I can't throw it away. Not because I'm attached to the cup itself, but because small objects become the last pieces holding together a fading picture when you've lost so much. I once heard someone say that older people cling to objects, not out of obsession, but because memories no longer stay inside the mind. They drift outward, clinging to cups, chairs, tablecloths, trying to live a little longer in things that can still be touched. Like how, every time I wipe the photo frame of Liam holding his teddy bear, I remember his tiny hand touching my cheek for the first time. That time he didn't say anything. He just looked at me for a long while and smiled. A toothless smile, mouth wide open, drool on his chin, but his eyes lit up like I was his entire world. That was long ago. Now, he probably doesn't remember. I'm not sad. I acknowledge it. Just as I recognize that Rachel never truly saw me as her mother, even with all the politeness, even with the mom and me she used in conversation, even with the Mother's Day cards. Some things don't need to be said. You feel them in the cold air between two women. I once tried to change that. I had asked, "Do you need help with anything?" I had baked, bought flowers, made calls, cleaned the house, and held the baby all afternoon so Rachel could rest. But when someone doesn't want you, every effort becomes a burden. Like a door that doesn't open, no matter how politely, how patiently you knock. Eventually I stopped knocking, no pushback, explanations, or hopes. I just understood. And understanding isn't as painful as people think. It isn't a wound. It's a slow dissolving like salt in water. No one sees it, no one hears it. Only you know you're no longer whole like you once were. I still live in my ground floor apartment, take walks every evening, call old friends, reread a few old novels. Life isn't bad. It's just that it no longer carries the sound of children's footsteps in the hall, or someone calling out "Grandma," or the feeling of being needed. One day I was sitting under the porch roof when a message came from Micah. "We're at the beach." Liam asked why Grandma wasn't here. Rachel told him you were busy. "Are you doing okay?" I read it over and over. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because of one small thing. Liam remembered me. And he asked. That was the first time I cried in years. Not out loud. No need for anyone to comfort me. Just silent tears falling onto the back of my hand, soaking into the wrinkles that had arrived quietly, without me noticing. The morning after I got Micah's message, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun hadn't quite risen yet, just a soft gray drifting past the window, as thin as the layer of dust on the photo frame. I made coffee like I always do, but instead of sitting at the kitchen table, I brought the cup out to the front porch and the wooden chair I had repainted last summer. The smell of old wood, fresh coffee, and damp soil from the previous night's watering blended into a familiar, quiet scent, so calm it felt hollow. I clearly remember when Liam asked, "Grandma, are you coming to the beach with us?" His voice was still wobbly then, and the word beach sounded like beesh. I laughed, brushed his hair back, and said, "If your mom invites me, I'll go." Rachel was holding Liam at the time. She didn't say anything, just smiled softly. The kind of smile you can't tell is agreement or reluctance. Everything after that happened slowly, like seaweed drifting toward shore. I was never asked again, and it was never mentioned. There was no invitation, but no refusal either. I just disappeared from the list. I used to think I'd become a bother if I asked, insisted, or complained. So I chose to step back. Then back again. Until no one remembered that I had once stood in that room, placed my hand on someone's shoulder, and once sung a child to sleep. And now they're in Florida. I picture it clearly. Blue ocean, white sand, Rachel in a button-down summer dress, Liam running ahead, hair wet, speckled with sand, Micah rubbing sunscreen onto his wrists. Maybe they'll eat seafood tonight. Rachel will order grilled oysters, Micah will pick out a white wine, and Liam will ask for more fries. The conversation will circle work, school, and next year's plans. Maybe they'll take a family photo, and Rachel will post it online. Choose a warm light filter and caption "Summer with Family," with a heart emoji. I won't be in it. But there won't be a blank space either. That's what I've come to understand. When you're no longer mentioned, no one asks, no one senses anything missing, then your absence stops being an event, it simply becomes the way things are. Like a house that once had flowers, now bare, neighbors passing by only say, "Looks plain these days," without asking where the flowers went. I set my coffee cup on the windowsill. My phone screen was still glowing on the table, showing Micah's last message. "Are you doing okay, Mom?" A short question like a touch that pulls away before you can hold it. I didn't reply right away. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Then I walked into the room and took from the drawer a small bag I'd already packed, some clothes, medicine, a half-read book, a few packets of tea. Not to go far. I just wanted to leave that air, if only for a few hours. I went to the town library, the one with the big windows overlooking the lake, where Micah and I used to read books together when he was little. I picked a quiet corner, opened my book but didn't read. I just looked at the pages and watched the people around me. An older man writing something intently, a woman older than me flipping through a cookbook, two children trading comic cards. No one knew who I was. No one knew I had once built my life around a family that no longer needed me. But that didn't feel as empty as it used to. Maybe because I'm starting to understand that not every presence needs to be acknowledged. Some things you give, do, or love aren't meant to leave a trace. They need to be there at the right time, whole, and then drift away. I no longer want to reclaim anything. I don't want to step forward or turn away. I don't need to say that I was once there. I don't need to send pictures or prove I was once required. What remains in me now is a quiet gratitude that I was there. Someone once called me Mom, called me Grandma, and held onto my finger with a tiny hand. I have nothing to wrap up. Nothing to begin again. I only have today, another day like many others, but with one thing I know for sure. I still have myself. And sometimes, in this world, holding on to yourself is the most quietly enduring form of survival. Perhaps the greatest sorrow in life isn't betrayal. It's being quietly left out of the lives of those you once held as your whole world. Like Eleanor, a mother and a grandmother, who was there for every step of her family's journey, only to slowly become an absence no one speaks of. This story isn't about anger. It doesn't need a tragic ending. It's simply the journey of realizing that sometimes love is not enough to make people stay. And sometimes the only thing we can do is keep on living, not in resentment or hope, but without losing who we are. Eleanor doesn't protest. She doesn't step forward, nor does she walk away. She stands still, like an old tree quietly holding onto its own shadow, to remind us that there are people who continue to love us in silence, even when no longer called by name. If you still have a mother, a grandmother, or someone who once quietly stepped back so you could move forward, ask them something simple. Are you doing okay? Sometimes just that one question is enough to pull someone back from the edge of being forgotten. And if something in this story made you pause for a moment, feel your heart sink just a little, or see a part of yourself in Eleanor's eyes, leave a comment. Let us know you're still here, still listening, and that you have walked through quiet, empty spaces no one ever noticed. And if you believe this story deserves to reach someone, a mother, a son, or simply someone who's felt forgotten, please share it. Stories like this don't need to echo loudly. They need to stay. Follow the channel to keep discovering more small slices of life, those quiet pieces of memory that may touch you deeper than any words of comfort ever could.